thanks for staying with us on the conversation. Earlier on, we had discussions in Nigeria where the ruling party, the All Progressives Congress candidate Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has finally chosen a running mate in the person of Senator Kashim Shettima, representing Borno Central Senatorial District. And right now, we switch to situations in Rwanda, where the president, Paul Kagame, has finally hinted seeking fourth term as Rwandan president. Now, Kagame has been the leader of Rwanda since 1994 after his Patriotic Front Party helped to end the genocide in the country. He disclosed his plans for the 2024 elections during an interview with journalists on Friday. Asked if he would seek re-election, Kagame, who is 64, said, "I would consider running for another 20 years. I have no problem with that. Elections are about people choosing." Now, in 2015, the constitution was changed, allowing him to stay until 2034. In the last presidential election 5 years ago, official figures showed he won 99% of the vote, which many outside the country dismissed as a sham. He is the fourth and current president of Rwanda, having taken office in 2000. Kagame previously commanded the Rwandan Patriotic Front, that is a Ugandan-based rebel force which invaded Rwanda in 1990 and was one of the parties of the conflict during the Rwandan Civil War and the armed forces which ended the Rwandan genocide. Now, join us live for this conversation. We have Dr. Adeoye Akinola, Head of Research and Teaching Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation at the University of Johannesburg. Thank you so much, Dr. Akinola, for joining us in the conversation.
Thank you also for having me on your program.
Now, if you look at Paul Kagame, Dr. Akinola, he contested in the 2003, 2010 and 2017 elections. Now, in 2019, if you would recall, Kagame was quoted in an interview declaring that he would not be interested in the presidential office come 2024. Now, with this recent declaration, did it actually come as a surprise to you?
No. And I'm also sure when he said it in 2019, he himself must have been laughing inside because he didn't also believe what he said. And many people also did not believe him because that is consistent with the character and the nature of many African leaders. So I wasn't surprised.
Okay, now still looking at this hint of a fourth term of office, he contested, as I said earlier on, 2003, 2010 and 2017. Now, in this 2017 elections, we saw human rights evidence of irregularities by election officials, including forcing voters to write their votes in full view and casting votes for electors who had not voted. Now, how would you describe the electoral process in Rwanda?
One needs to understand the Rwanda socio-political terrain to be able to locate this and put it in the proper context. Of course, the government is in control of many of the media houses, and they have been able to quash every form of oppositions that was supposed to be popular. But if you look at the news from the grassroots in Rwanda, then you know that what they had at the time was not secret ballot system. It was purely intimidation. If you also know what has been happening even before the election was that the people in Rwanda were actually living under this climate of fear, under this surveillance system. It was actually like a police state. Even before you decide to go and cast your vote, you know that it is not about your own personal choice, but it was supposed to be something that will also align with the choice of someone more powerful than you, bigger than you, and has eyes all over the country and even in the polling unit. So the election was never a secret one. You had to cast your vote, and people that will monitor you will actually see who you are voting for.
And looking at this climate of fear among Rwandans with this new intent of contesting in 2024, how do you think they reacted to this?
It was mixed feelings because many of the Rwandans, they already knew even before he made this recent announcement or insinuation that he will also continue in office. They expected him to continue in office, and it's as if they have actually relapsed to this hopelessness. And it doesn't look as if they have a choice but to continue to accommodate his rulership. Because they don't see anybody defeating him. The last election he won, more than 99% voted for him. That was actually incredible. I've never in my life seen any election like that. And I've never read in the history book that somebody was so popular that he won more than 99%. That was strange.
Very strange indeed. But aside this climate of fear, Paul Kagame has been in power since about 1994 in Rwanda. How would you rate the national development in Rwanda under his administration so far?
Yes, well, maybe we should start by the inflation rate. According to the latest figure, inflation rate is currently at about 12.6%. The unemployment rate has been about 15% for almost 10 years. We realized that last year it rose to about 24%, and now it stands around 17%. If you also follow the news, Rwanda is ranked 16th among 47 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and is the fourth best investment destination in Africa, only coming behind Egypt, Morocco, and South Africa. But be it as it may, people have also spoken of the climate of investment in the country. You are free to come and invest. It's driving investment. So it's not a pessimistic view of the economy of Rwanda, because Rwanda economy is actually growing. If you consider a country that moved, that was nearly destroyed before 1994, and for them to get to this stage, one has to still give credits to the president for driving some economic recovery and resilience in the midst of all those human rights abuse record.
A bit of credit there for Paul Kagame. But in 2015, Dr. Akinola, the constitution was changed, allowing him to stay until 2034. Now, how did this legitimize Paul Kagame's rule? And do you think that Kagame is hiding under the shield of the constitution?
Yes, it won't be the first one that would do that. In the Sahel, we have seen many presidents, many head of state using the legitimate power granted by the Constitution to extend and consolidate on their regimes. But what is particularly interesting in this case was the body language he gave, and he actually assured many people that he wasn't going to run again, and many Rwandans, some of them were relieved. But the truth is just that many also understood that he was still going to push for regime elongation, because if you look at the last constitutional review, even the parliament, they had to legitimize it. We had records that about 6.3 million people actually signed the document asking him to continue, asking people to change the constitution. But we know that these are all bunch of rules. It was actually sponsored by the government itself. So of course there is legitimacy. No, I can't call it legitimacy. What we have is legalism. But in terms of legitimacy, people were allowed to choose. If people were allowed to vote freely, and if people were allowed to have input in the constitution without fear, I'm sure it wouldn't have legitimacy at all.
Legalism, indeed. Now, Dr. Akinola has chair right now, the present chair of the Commonwealth, and a lot of conspiracies on the Kagame's role. You talked about a climate of fear which Rwandans live in. Do you see him as fit for this position as the chair of the Commonwealth?
The Commonwealth are made up of relatively leaders like him, leaders that if they have their way, they will get power. I'm talking of the former colonies, particularly in Africa. And the Western nations, most of the times, do not actually care who is the president or what the president is doing, as long as fuel keep flowing from some of the African countries into Europe, as long as they have their grip on the economies of these countries. So they wouldn't mind putting him as the leader of any organization they can even appoint him as the leader of the world for them. They care less. When Kigali was to host the Commonwealth, people actually reacted, and many of the human rights organizations were actually surprised. 24 of the civil societies in Rwanda actually petition showing their surprise that how can you allow such a leader to host and to lead such organization. But that's the way it is. It just shows that many of the times these leaders do not care about what is happening in Africa.
There's a big question mark on the leaders there. Thank you so much, Dr. Adeoye Akinola, Head of Research and Teaching Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation at the University of Johannesburg, for sharing so much light on this particular issue. Thank you.
Many thanks.
And that's where we'll draw the curtains for today's edition of The Conversation. We discussed just right now Rwanda's President Paul Kagame hinting once again for a fourth term in presidency after ruling for about three previous tenures. And of course, we had Dr. Akinola right there talking about situations in Rwanda. Do join us again on Wednesday for another edition of The Conversation. I am Rita Omodia.